Since the creation of the atomic bomb, tales of the brutal effects of nuclear warfare, of the horrifying and mutagenic properties of radiation, and of the complete destruction of life as we know it have filled the corners of storytelling. Music, poetry, novels, film, television, video games, and more. Every method of conveying a narrative or warning against the folly of mankind has included humanity's potential for utter annihilation. Within these stories, tales of nuclear catastrophes destroying entire swaths of land, of nuclear weapons wiping out humanity, of monstrous mutants attacking the final remnants of mankind, of the debilitating dangers of radiation, and of humanity's efforts to rebuild in horrifying hellscapes sink into the dark depths of our own depravity. Stories like Ray Bradbury's There'll Come Soft Rains, like Ishiro Honda's 1954 classic Godzilla, like Dmitry Glukovsky's irradiated iteration of Moscow in Metro 2033. The Metro series is a massive multimedia universe, spanning 3 books by Dmitry Glukovsky, 3 video game titles with stories also by Glukovsky, and a wide variety of short stories, novellas, and novels written by a multitude of authors endorsed and promoted by Glukovsky himself. The series takes place 20 years after a nuclear holocaust left the entire world devastated. Sticking true to the theme of most nuclear annihilation films, there is no victor in such a war. Only those left grief-stricken in a ruined world. In this destroyed future, the survivors take refuge in the underground labyrinth of Moscow's metro system. Down in the dark, the protagonist Artyom is tasked with saving the metro system time and time again, clinging to the flickering embers of hope that float down the endless tunnels. Before we dive into the video game series itself, looking specifically at its stories, its horror, and its prominent themes, we'll first be looking at the inspiration for the series and the novels that inspired the VIII Games Metro video game franchise. Metro 2033 has a long development history and an even richer history of inspiration. Glukovsky began brainstorming what would eventually become the Metro series in the early to mid-1990s. The written works of Boris and Arkady Strugatsky, particularly Roadside Picnic in the Doomed City, the film Letters of a Dead Man by Konstantin Lopushansky, and even the original Fallout titles by Black Isle Studios served as preliminary inspiration for the Metro franchise. The ruined worlds, the post-apocalyptic hellscapes, and even many of the dangers present in each iteration of our future pop up sporadically in the book and the video games. However, the primary catalyst for Metro 2033's creation was not a piece of literary work, but the complete collapse of Soviet society.
Repeating once again our top story, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has been removed from power, and there are tanks now in the streets of Moscow. Vice President Gennady...
According to Glukovsky himself, he was only 12 years old when the Soviet Union collapsed. Everything we knew about the history, politics, culture, all our systems of values, our entire empire, it was just cancelled by a TV announcement overnight. We woke up on the ruins of an empire, on the ruins of our own civilization. Now, Glukovsky wasn't expressing nostalgia for an era of the Soviet Union, but rather expressing the fear that arose in the wake of its total collapse. To be a child in an uncertain world, to feel the fear of the future all around you, yet to have the potential to be free from debilitating political control, and to have freedom and political diversity after centuries of dictatorships and monarchies. This, in essence, became the origin point for Metro, and many of these themes and concepts are deeply woven into the fabric of the Metro universe, regardless of the media it is expressed in. Metro 2033 did not become published under typical circumstances. Instead, the book evolved over years online, with Glukovsky posting chapters to his website in the early 2000s. 2033's earliest readers became beta testers of sorts, who were picking holes in the economy and locations, fact-checking, and that sort of thing. By 2005, the manuscript was printed by Expo, a Russian publishing house, and the book quickly became an international bestseller. Around this time, VIII Games, a Ukrainian video game development company composed of former GSC Game World members, expressed an interest in developing a video game adaptation of the story. This new iteration of Metro features similar characters and situations, as well as entirely new storylines and situations. To bridge the gap between, we'll be examining both iterations, their differences and their similarities as the story unfolds. Now, let's dive into the source material that generated this vibrant world of literature and interactive media. Metro 2033. Metro 2033 takes place 20 years after a nuclear holocaust decimated the world. To escape the blasts and the ensuing fallout, the survivors of Moscow took refuge deep in the underground metro network. In the years following, city-states arose in each station, some with their own ideologies and religions that began trading and even warring with one another. As the violence and animosity continues to escalate, a new terrifying force enters into the metro system from the destroyed world up above. A force that threatens to annihilate all life underground. Beings known as the Dark Ones.
Stop him, stop him. Destroy him.
The story begins with protagonist Artyom living somewhat peacefully in the Exhibition Metro station along with his stepfather. Artyom spends his time patrolling the tunnels and working in mushroom factories. However, one day, a man by the name of Hunter, a member of the Spartan Order, which seeks to protect and preserve the Metro, approaches Artyom about the Dark One's increasing attacks around Exhibition. Artyom reveals that he and a friend went above ground in a nearby station and forgot to seal the hatch, allowing the Dark Ones to enter into the Metro. Hunter entrusts Artyom with a mission to carry the message of Exhibition's call for help to a man named Miller at the Polis Station, the headquarters of the Spartan Order, in hopes of receiving aid. This journey is the catalyst for the entire story. Much of the novel follows Artyom's journey to Polis. On his journey, Artyom encounters the many dangers of the metro tunnels, psychic forces able to be transmitted through pipes, criminal gangs and bandits roaming the tunnels, the brutality of an emerging Fourth Reich, horrifying mutants, and even cannibals that stalk the darkened networks. Each subsequent stop in horror reveals the desperate nature of the Metro and how close it truly is to total collapse. While Artyom successfully reaches Polis and informs Miller of Exhibition's plight and Hunter's disappearance, the Order chooses not to aid Exhibition. In response, a faction of the Order approaches Artyom with a proposition: head above ground to find information on a missile silo that can launch a warhead at the Dark Ones' hive, destroying them completely. Artyom and a small group consisting of Miller and a man named Daniel enter into the Russian State Library. Here, the group seeks to find documents on the semi-mythological Metro 2 line, known as D6. The group encounters mutated creatures known as librarians that roam the stacks. These entities attack the group and mortally wound Daniel. With his dying breath, Daniel gives Artyom and Miller the instructions for finding D6, and with this information, descend back into the darkness of the Metro. While waiting for reinforcements, Artyom becomes involved with a child abduction case. Tasked with finding the missing Oleg, Artyom stumbles upon a cult of cannibals that worship a mutated entity they refer to as the Great Worm. After he and Oleg are rescued by Miller and by a squad of Spartan Order fighters, the group descends into Metro 2 in search of D6. There, a strange mutagenic bioweapon attempts to hypnotize and kill the squad, resulting in the death of Oleg before it is able to be distracted. The majority of the squad heads for the missile silo, while Artyom pays one last visit to Exhibition. It is revealed that the station is nearly overrun by the Dark Ones. In one final push, Artyom makes it to the surface and heads for Ostankino Tower, a tall building that overlooks the Dark One's hive and provides a vantage point for marking the hive for destruction. After a hard fight to the top, Artyom marks the hive, and the missiles are launched. While standing there, he has a vision from the Dark Ones. The creatures only wanted to communicate, to help mankind in the wake of the world's destruction, but their attempts have only been met with violence. As Artyom comes to this realization, he can only watch in horror as a missile struck the Dark Ones' nest, killing them all. Complicit in the genocide of an entire species, Artyom tearfully rips off his mask and returns to the Metro, unsure of the future of the world in the wake of this unforgettable and unforgivable atrocity. Metro 2033 analyzes the human condition after all forms of governance collapse, and after all supply chains deteriorate in the wake of the world's destruction. All that was known, and has ever been known, is reduced to nothing but rubble, and only the will of the survivors hints at a possible future. This is the consistent tone set for the entire novel, one of hopelessness, of rampant xenophobia, of distrusting one's own neighbor, of the consequences of man's actions, of horrifying mutants, of the depravity of man, and of the ramshackle conditions of those surviving in the Metro. The atmosphere is bleak, and it becomes increasingly clear as the novel progresses that humanity truly has not learned from its own self-destructive mistakes. Bukowski ingrains a sense of cosmic, supernatural, and psychological horror into the book through the intense supernatural trauma left lingering from the burning of millions of lives above and below ground. The trauma was so great that the psychic imprints of those who perished lay scattered across the wastelands above and the dark tunnels below. These psychic blasts are so powerful that Bourbon, one of Artyom's first companions on his journey, dies from the intensity of this influence. However, it is later revealed that many of these voices heard through the pipes are not screams of the dead, but instead chants made by the Great Worm cannibal cult as a method of luring in victims. Along with these other threats, the seemingly omnipresent threat to the Dark Ones hangs over the entire Metro. The Dark Ones, mutated creatures descended from post-war humans, appear to possess otherworldly abilities, injecting vivid visions into the mind of Artyom, able to appear and disappear at will, and their mere presence and psychic influence drives humans to insanity and beyond. This final act forces the Metro system into violent opposition to those perceived as invaders, as a means of proper communication does not exist naturally. Khan hypothesizes the creatures were created artificially before the war for unknown purposes, with Artyom adding that God breathed souls into them after the collapse of mankind. Regardless of their true origins, the Dark Ones represent a cosmic force beyond conventional understanding, and serve to push forward several of the thematic topics ingrained in the story. While 2033 explores the hopelessness and depravity of humanity following a nuclear holocaust, the story highlights thematic topics of xenophobia, of genocide, of violence,
If it's hostile, you kill it.
and of fear of the unknown. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the newly emerged Russian Federation suffered from heightened xenophobia and violence in an era where the future was still entirely unknown. These elements have ingrained themselves into the 2033 novel, particularly through the Dark Ones, the warring factions, and the actions of Artyom at the book's end. 2033 carries with it a prominent fear of the unknown. This fear consumes every corner of the Metro, from the factions at war with one another, to the fear of what may come the next day, to the fear of the creatures that prowl both above and below the surface. This fear is closely tied to the thematic topic of xenophobia expressed through the Dark Ones. The survivors fear what they do not understand and what they perceive as a threat, leading to the continual violence between the Dark Ones and the remnants of humanity. No attempt is made for communication, only violence breeding more violence, death breeding more death. This violence culminates in the eradication of the Dark Ones. In a single instant, an entire species is eradicated, wiped from existence at the hands of Artyom and the Spartan Order. In this destruction, humanity has shown no growth, has shown they've learned nothing from the Great War that ravaged the world. They repeat the exact same actions that left Moscow and Russia and the world at large in its current state, dropping bombs on those they do not understand. Whether it be the Dark Ones or a foreign nation, violence is seen as the only option.
If it's hostile, you kill it.
Metro 2033 by VIII Games follows the plotlines of the book quite closely, given the fact the storylines were written by Glukhovsky himself. The same plot elements, locations, characters, and more are featured within the game, albeit with some alterations in order to better adapt the story to an action and survival horror-driven narrative. While the book discusses various socio-political issues present in Russian history, the game strays into the overt horror of the situation and focuses primarily on the warring factions, the mutant threats, and the Dark Ones. Overall though, the endpoint of Artyom and the Dark Ones remains relatively unchanged. 2033 begins with Artyom and Miller climbing up a ladder to the world above. The pair fight off a pack of watchmen and push outside to be greeted by their fellow Order members. A large horde of watchmen encircle the vehicle and begin an assault. Then, demons appear, and the screen cuts to black. The narrative begins 8 days prior. Players take control of Artyom and the exhibition station the day that Hunter appears at the station's doors. Similar to the book, Hunter tasks Artyom with reaching Polis and informing the Spartan Rangers of Exhibition's increasing attacks from both mutants, specifically the Nasales, a mainstay mutant created for the video games, and the Dark Ones alike. And just like the novel, Hunter does not return, and Artyom sets off on his arduous journey through the Metro. Similarly, Artyom meets up with a guide named Bourbon who offers him a ride towards Dry Station, a stop along his route. However, rather than Bourbon being killed by a psychic blast emanating from the pipes, he is instead captured by bandits at the Dry Station and killed by the leader. Cue the introduction of Khan. Khan's characterization differs drastically from his novel counterpart. In this iteration, he acts as Artyom's guide to the supernatural elements of the world, and acts as the pacifist counterbalance to the militant standpoint of the Order. He discusses Artyom's attunement to the psionic imprints left behind, and his ability to communicate with the Dark Ones. He teaches Artyom how to navigate the dangerous ghosts unable to pass over, and how to avoid becoming victims of these lost souls. Khan also advises Artyom on the dangerous anomalies that roam the tunnels of the Metro, a new addition to the game as a carryover from those who worked previously on the Stalker franchise. Khan ultimately guides Artyom to the Armory Station and instructs him to find a man named Andrew. The Armory is Artyom's first look at the radical political ideologies that plague the Metro tunnels. The station is controlled by a militant communist faction known as the Red Line, a violent regime that captures Artyom, is seen interrogating and killing civilians, and ultimately kills a man who escapes with Artyom. Andrew, known as the Blacksmith, saves Artyom and provides him passage out of the Armory. Unfortunately, this places him on the front lines of a war between the Red Line Communist faction and the Fourth Reich Fascist faction. As with the Red Line, the Fourth Reich commits similarly horrid atrocities. This faction winds up capturing Artyom after he sneaks across the front lines, though 2 Spec Ops Rangers from the Order, Ullman and Pavel, save Artyom. Pavel splits from Ullman and guards Artyom to the Polis station. The pair steal an armored car, are chased by Nazi rail cars and panzers, and confront a horde of Nasales that kill Pavel and their escape attempt. Artyom reaches the whole station on his own as a horde of Nasales attack the station on the brink of total collapse. And after a powerful sonic wave generated by the Dark Ones knocks him unconscious, Artyom wakes to a destroyed station. He saves a child by the name of Sasha, harkening back to the events of the novel with the child Oleg, but returns the kid to his mother. Then, Artyom heads above ground, navigates the Nazi stronghold Black Station, and eventually reunites with Ullman. From there, the pair head to Polis. After reaching his presumed final destination, his journey finally over, Artyom presents Miller with Hunter's dog tag, informs him of his fate, and of the condition of the exhibition station. The council convenes, but ultimately decides against helping the exhibition with its Dark Ones and mutant problems, essentially leaving them to die. This is done in an effort to prepare for the coming war with both the Fourth Reich and the Red Line. Not accepting this outcome, Miller urges Artyom to head above ground to the Russian State Library in order to find the location of D6 and its associated missile silos, with the intent of destroying the Dark One's hive. And just as in the novel, Artyom heads there along with Miller and a Spartan named Danila, encounters the hostile librarians, and ultimately finds a map leading the group to D6. Artyom and his squad regroup at Sparta, an above-ground order base located in an abandoned church. There, Artyom sees Khan again, who urges Artyom to consider another path, one that is less violent, offering a counterbalance to the orders of its hostile kill-it dogma. After careful planning, the group then heads to D6. Along the way, Artyom has a vision of the Dark Ones. They proclaim peace, despite all Artyom had personally witnessed along the way. And despite this message of peace, Artyom pushes forward, and the vision ends. After a brief run-in with the Nassal's Horde and a Dark Star anomaly, the group reaches D6. Descending down into the depths of D6, the group encounters a strange biomass that has taken hold of the reactor itself. This pulls from the original novel as well. Ultimately, the team destroys the strange mutant and reactivate the reactor, powering up the facility. Together, Artyom and Miller ascend to the surface for one final time, missile guidance system in hand, in order to destroy the Dark Ones once and for all. This then cues the intro-level cinematic, a pack of watchmen and a demon flying down towards Artyom. Miller saves Artyom from the demon, and the two work their way towards Ostankino Tower, just as in the novel. The two climb up to the top, battling mutants, demons, and crumbling infrastructure along the way. Miller is injured by an attacking demon, leaving Artyom the sole task of placing the guidance system. The Dark Ones react, assaulting Artyom with vision after vision, pleading with him to stop the approaching genocide. Artyom has a vision of Hunter in this strange ethereal landscape, and rather than listening to the wishes of Khan, Artyom follows Hunter's advice.
If it's hostile, you kill it.
Despite their best efforts, Khan and the Dark Ones fail, and the missile collides with the hive. The Dark Ones are wiped out. In the wake of this tragedy, Artyom returns to the metro tunnels, unsure of what to make of the Dark Ones' vision, nor his role in their eradication. The video game focuses less on overt commentaries on religion and politics. While these thematic topics are present, they are not the focus of this game. These elements take a backseat to the conversations on persistent violence, elements of xenophobia, and a message on genocide. No cannibals, worm cults, nor Satanists digging into hell are expressly seen in this version of Metro. Artyom's journey in the Metro is also expedited, skipping entire sections present in the book while creating entirely new ones. Burbenstol acts as an early guide for Artyom, but instead of dying from a psychic blast in the pipes, he is instead killed by bandits at Dry Station. Khan's book counterpart is entirely different. Briefly in the novel, Orly Gray, a master manipulator, and carrying with him an intense presence that both unnerves and intimidates those who encounter him. In the game, his role is entirely different. He acts as a mystic guide, teaching Artyom about the paranormal dangers of the Metro. Khan also acts as a moral compass for Artyom, pushing him to walk the line of mercy and forgiveness, in contrast to the orders of its hostile kill-it doctrine. Khan urges Artyom time and time again to seek to understand and negotiate, than to blindly blunder forward and commit atrocities he cannot reverse. This creates a balance for Artyom, hearing from both the moral pacifist in Khan and the moral militarist in Miller and Hunter. Artyom himself is quite similar yet distinctly different from his novel counterpart. Rather than being a strictly bookish, non-lethal, stealth-based individual with little to no combat training, Artyom is noted to be an excellent marksman by Hunter and, should the player choose, is capable of killing large swaths of people. This puts him in stark contrast to his book counterpart, who had one kill under his belt before the annihilation of the Dark Ones. While the two mediums may have their own strengths and weaknesses, the horror elements present in the video game help to elevate the disturbing moments shown in the book. Instead of focusing on the depravity and hopelessness of man, the game focuses more on man versus nature, pitting Artyom against terrifying mutants and the dangers of this ruined world in oftentimes dark and enclosed tunnels. Radiation, flying demons, hordes of mutants, bands of bandits, warring factions. All of these serve to impede Artyom's progress through the Metro. The biggest shift from the books to the game is the introduction of the mainstay mutant, the Nasalis. Despite being one of the more common enemies found in both 2033 and Last Light, the Nasalis mutant does not appear in the novel. Along with new additions, VIII Games introduced a concept from Roadside Picnic and the Stalker franchise, the Anomaly. Only seen sporadically in the series, anomalies are seen in the Metro tunnels in the form of a seemingly sentient ball of lightning. They form and travel down the narrow passages, electrocuting any living being it comes into contact with. Khan advises Artyom on how to best deal with them, hinting towards a kind of sentience. The game also highlights other supernatural and cosmic elements as well. Ghosts of those who died in the tunnels. Visions of events long since past. Psychic blasts and laughter emanating from pipes. The gruesome effects of the Dark Ones on the minds of survivors. All tied together to create dangers at every turn. Man, mutant, the supernatural. None are safe from these omnipresent threats. Like with 2033, many of the same themes pop up in the video game adaptation. Xenophobia, genocide, violence,
If it's hostile, you kill it.
and morality all remain large thematic topics explored in the game. The Dark Ones maintain their role as the otherized group, instigating a fear of the unknown in the survivors living in the Metro. From the start, the player bears witness to the effects of the Dark Ones, the madness they instill, the destruction they've wrought, and the supposed death of Hunter, instigating a sense of anger and animosity towards these beings. However, unlike Artyom, the player realizes the mistake the moment those missiles launch. As in the book, the canon ending of 2033 sees Artyom launching missiles at the Dark Ones. Unlike his book alternate, Artyom does not immediately recognize the horror of his actions. Instead, he wonders in vain the true message of the visions the Dark Ones sent him. This creates a sense of dramatic irony for the player, with them knowing full well the weight of their actions. Violence seeps throughout the story, ending with the genocide of the Dark Ones. Even if the player attempts to heed the warnings of Khan and the visions of the Dark Ones, and successfully achieves the good ending where the Dark Ones are saved, the only canon ending the player can truly achieve is the destruction of the Hive and the annihilation of the Dark Ones. The point of 2033 isn't to learn from past mistakes, isn't to stop the cycle of violence, but to repeat the same mistakes that led humanity to the brink of destruction. To repeat the very action that left the world in such a ruined state. To ignore all of the red flashing lights all around them. To fail. To fail to learn, to grow, and evolve. A failure doomed to be repeated in Metro 2034. Metro 2034 takes place around 1 year after the events of the original Metro novel. Instead of following the primary protagonist Artyom, the narrative perspective switches to that of Hunter, the Sparta Order member believed to have been killed in the first novel and video game. Hunter, despite being a strong-willed individual in his first depiction, is shown as a broken man, suffering from his experiences with the Dark Ones at the start of 2033. Similar to its preceding book, 2034 features a bleak story fraught with violence, morally gray decisions, and depicts a struggling Metro system. 2034 primarily follows an aging author named Homer as he seeks to understand the mysterious Hunter. Hiding out in the furthest reaches of the Metro, battle-scarred and dealing with untold trauma, Hunter ventures out on a mission to understand why the isolated Sevastopolskaya has suddenly lost contact with the more centralized metro stations. Stations they rely on for ammunition and supplies, in exchange for electric power flowing into the metro. Hunter volunteers to lead an expedition to the dark stations in order to re-establish communication, or at the very least, understand what is happening in the wider metro. Homer accompanies him on his journey, as well as a young man named Ahmed, married and a father of 2. As the trio begin their adventure, Hunter's condition slowly becomes more and more apparent, and the dangers of the metro begin to sink in. The trio arrive at the Nagornaya station. While there, a thick white mist of toxic gases slowly engulfs the tunnels. The trio see a giant creature lurking in the fog, with Ahmed growing more and more hysterical as the moments pass. Rather than stick with his group, Hunter rushes off into the fog to fight the creature, leaving Ahmed and Homer to their fate. Despite attempting to leave Nagornaya, the pair find themselves exactly where they began. Ahmed believes the station refuses to let him go, and while he urges Homer to leave, he is suddenly yanked into the fog and into oblivion. After Homer and Hunter regroup, Homer lambasts Hunter for leaving them and for Ahmed's death, only hearing a sarcastic remark from Hunter. Homer and Hunter continue their journey to Nagatinskaya, their next destination, leaving Ahmed to his gruesome fate. However, upon arriving, all but one solitary resident had fled the station to the nearby Tolskaya without explanation. After interrogating the hungry and ramshackle person and learning nothing of value, Homer witnesses Hunter's heartless nature firsthand when the British man puts 2 bullets into the head of Nagatinskaya's sole resident. When asked why he killed the man, Hunter simply states, "Ask yourself that." And then the two press on to Tolskaya station. After an argument between Hunter and the guards at the Tolskaya station, the doors are sealed shut, forcing the pair to take an alternate route. However, despite Homer being certain of Tolskaya being controlled by Sevastopolites, Hunter instead claims the station is being controlled by bandits and must be eradicated. While backtracking through Nakimovsky station, Homer finds a notebook with entries dating back only a few days prior. One of the previous entries indicates the station had been sealed off by the Hansa, the most prominent political and economic faction in the metro, refusing to allow anyone to go further into the metro. Slowly beginning to distrust Hunter, Homer ultimately makes the decision to keep this new information to himself as the two push onwards. The pair take a detour through the abandoned and heavily irradiated Kakhovskaya line. There, Hunter and Homer encounter Sasha, the teenage daughter of a recently exiled and deceased station master. Despite Homer's pleas to help the girl, Hunter insists that it would be simpler to shoot her and leave her than to add her to the group. However, Homer disagrees and allows Sasha to join them on their journey. Following this, Homer reads out more of the diary he found and discovers the reason for the sudden radio silence. A virus has begun sweeping through the metro, instigating a series of lockdowns and quarantines. Once again, Homer keeps this to himself and suspects Hunter knows full well why the stations are on lockdown. He suspects this is the very reason why Hunter suggested eradicating Tolskaya, displaying Hunter's growing thirst for blood. After a mutant attack at Pavlitskaya leaves Hunter injured, Homer reveals all he knows, confirming that Hunter intends on wiping out the entire station, healthy and otherwise, leaving no one behind. This is soon followed by Sasha confronting Hunter only to learn he did not intentionally save her during the mutant attack, but simply wanted to kill the monster, adding that he feels nothing. Hunter temporarily leaves without Homer or Sasha, heading towards his next destination. The three eventually reunite, adding in a musician named Leonid at Dobryninskaya. As the trio prepare to travel towards Polis, Leonid reveals to Sasha that the disease had broken out in another station, but that exposure to radiation appeared to be a possible cure. Seizing this chance at averting a bloodbath, Sasha joins Leonid as he takes her to the supposed cure. Back down to the original duo, Hunter and Homer continue onward. As the duo move closer to the center of the metro, specifically Polis, Hunter's mental state grows increasingly unstable, and his violent tendencies and thoughts only seem to intensify. Even as the two reach Polis, Hunter very nearly forces his way in with violence, only to be stopped by Homer. After reuniting with and debriefing Miller on the situation and the threat the disease posed to the Metro itself, the Spartan leader provides Hunter with a group of heavily armed soldiers. Their sole task: to eradicate any infected Metro stations, and those adjacent to them without prejudice. At the same time, Sasha and Leonid make their way towards Tolskaya, knowing of the disease's weakness to radiation, hoping to prevent the inevitable. As the clock ticks down, Sasha and Leonid arrive at Tolskaya, hoping to sway the Spartans away from massacring the entire station. Sasha pleads with the soldiers, begging them to listen to her and their cure. The soldiers do not listen, and a dull rumbling fills the station. Before either party could arrive at Tolskaya, the remaining soldiers at the station put into place their own failsafe, rigging explosives to flood the entire station, killing all those infected and preventing the spread of this disease. As these bombs detonate and the waters begin to flood Tolskaya, Sasha believes it to be a miracle, that rain could wash away their sins and help them begin again. Instead, the order seals the station's hermetic doors, allowing all those inside to drown. Homer stands outside the doors, listening for any signs of life, before he's ordered to move out. In the aftermath of the massacre, Homer searches fruitlessly for Sasha's body, but never finds any trace of her. Several weeks later, Hunter and Homer find themselves back at Sevastopolskaya, bringing their story back full circle. Hunter is still wrestling with his own trauma and fracturing mental state, and Homer regrets having ever partaken in the events that unfolded. At the book's end, Hunter stands on the edge of light and dark at Sevastopolskaya, slowly humming a nameless composition that Sasha loved so dearly. "2034 focuses almost solely on the depravity of man, the moral decay of its protagonist, and the futile efforts of imposing morality on those unable to see past their own thirst for blood. Hunter's arc both mirrors and stands in stark contrast to that of Artyom's. Both embark on a quest they believe will help the Metro as a whole, but wind up committing unspeakable atrocities by the book's end. For Artyom, he ignored the blatant signs of the Dark One's benevolence until the missiles collided with the Hive, and for Hunter, he ignored the pleas of Sasha and the horror of Homer until the bombs went off and flooded all those who could have been saved. As stated, the violence of man and the horrible effects of the spreading virus take up a bulk of the disturbing and unnerving moments in the story. Hunter's abandoning Ahmed and Homer to kill mutants, his ruthless murdering of Amanda Nagantinskaya station, the killing of guardsmen at various stations, his inadvertent saving of Sasha purely out of his own bloodlust, his repeated desires to purge an entire station and more, and his seeming uncaring attitude towards the death of Sasha, Leonid, Ahmed, and so many more. The mysticism of the Metro also plays a part in amping up the cosmic core elements of 2034. The thick fog in Nagornaya, the creatures moving around in the mist, feels reminiscent of Stephen King's short story, The Mist. Ahmed's remarks in the station refusing to allow him to leave, that it's calling to him, gives the Metro and the station itself this own cosmic consciousness, leading to a sudden pull into the fog by an unknown creature being all the more unnerving. This mysticism is built up even more at the Polyanka station, referred to as the Station of Fate, and is treated as a kind of oracle capable of revealing the future and altering destinies, where both Hunter and Homer experience their own lucid visions. "2034 focuses prominently on the thematic topics of violence, morality, and trauma. Hunter takes up a bulk of these conversations, specifically on violence and trauma. Hunter is repeatedly shown to take delight in the killing of mutants. He voluntarily kills people as he deems it the easiest option, accuses an entire station of being bandits and in need of killing, and attempts to follow through with the killing of an entire station due to the spreading infection. He appears to have no remorse or second thoughts about his actions, even until the very end. Because he shows no growth, he winds up getting Sasha killed. He does not dispense mercy nor forgiveness, and it leads to countless deaths. A bulk of the novel deals with Hunter's own lingering trauma. From the start, readers are reintroduced to the battle-hardened Spartan first seen in 2033. Silent and brutish, scars covering his face, and unwilling to talk about what happened to him in the last year. This version of Hunter allows his inability to heal to dictate his actions, oftentimes with violent and wide-reaching consequences. He's filled with palpable indifference and bloodlust. Time and time again, readers witness numerous unprovoked killings, several instances of pure heartlessness in regards to his groupmates, and openly admits to being broken, to holding back a monster lingering just underneath, and fears what he may do in the future. Even more, Hunter shows little to no willingness to change. Because he cannot change, nothing the Metro will change. A man doomed to repeat the same cycle of mistakes over and over. Morality is once again a central battle here, primarily between militant Hunter, willing to do anything to secure peace and order in the Metro, and the more pacifist Sasha, wanting to prevent as much loss of life as possible, while still searching for peaceful solutions. Sasha tries in vain to appeal to Hunter's better nature, and this moral failure leads to the death of many. Hunter refuses to grow, to evolve, to heal from his past trauma, and instead continues to let the violence and trauma of his past dictate his future. Yet, Sasha begins to recognize this endless cycle of violence. A cycle sought to be broken in Metro Last Light. Hope is like blood. While it still flows through your veins, you're alive. Last Light diverges wildly from 2034, but maintains the focus on morality, violence, and lingering trauma. Plot elements, such as the disease spreading through the Metro, are also carried over and adapted from the novel. Rather than focusing on Hunter, however, the video game instead chooses to continue Artyom's storyline with the Dark Ones. Regardless of the protagonist, Last Light plunges players back into the dark depths of the Metro. Last Light again begins with Artyom awaking in his bedroom, this time in D6, and with Khan standing over him. Khan informs Artyom of a surviving Dark One hidden somewhere in the destroyed hive. As Artyom ventures through D6, whispers of groups being massacred in the marshes, the Fourth Reich and the Red Line committing horrifying atrocities in the Metro.
The Reds are mobilizing. They've recruited old men, schoolboys, sent them off to training camps. I tell you, war is coming.
And the role the Order plays in maintaining this fragile balance.
Slow down. The Order is neutral. We are the guardians of the entire Metro.
Additionally, a scientist by the name of Lesnitsky appears to have defected, disappearing into the Metro along with chemical weapons of some kind. Unlike 2033, wherein Hunter's message of violence, if it's hostile you kill it, dictates Artyom's response, Khan repeatedly stresses the importance of finding the remaining Dark One, of repairing the damage done by Artyom and the Order, and proceeding with a more non-violent approach. However, Miller predictably ignores this approach and orders Artyom and his daughter Beshat Anna to locate and eliminate the remaining Dark One. On the surface, Anna and Artyom head for the destroyed hive. After a brief encounter with Watchmen, Artyom locates the Dark One, realizing it is only just a child. Artyom attempts to capture it, but the Dark One knocks him unconscious, plunging him through his own memories, and the memories of the young Dark One. Memories of launching the nuke that destroyed the Dark Ones, and memories of the young Dark One watching his entire people be wiped out. By the time Artyom awakes, the pair have been captured by the Fourth Reich faction. Artyom once again awakens in a Fourth Reich kill room, along with Red Line prisoners. As the soldier draws closer to Artyom, intent on snuffing him out, a Red Line soldier by the name of Pavel Morozov breaks free, and together, the pair head to the main prison, and depending on the player's actions, can free the Reich's prisoners. After navigating through the base, both Pavel and Artyom escape the Reich's influence, and descend back into the dark tunnels of the Metro. Eventually, the pair make their way above ground, hoping to cover more area. After a run-in with Watchmen, the pair descend into the Red Line-controlled theater station. And it is here, despite all of the struggles the two went through, that Pavel betrays Artyom. Artyom is subjected to torture, physically, mentally, and psychologically, as the high-ranking General Corbett attempts to extract information on D6 in the Order from Artyom. After being injected with a kind of truth serum, Artyom is thrown back through his memories. As a child, he and two friends went above ground at the Botanical Gardens. There, Artyom is saved from a pack of Watchmen by a Dark One, instigating this connection between him and this entirely new species. Upon awakening, Artyom hears Pavel heading for the Dark One and, after engineering yet another escape with the help of 2034 character Leonid, learns of the Red Lines' plan to instigate an all-out war with the Metro, utilizing some kind of secret weapon. After escaping, Artyom reunites with his old friend, Andrew the Blacksmith, and returns to the Metro tunnels. The silent protagonist traverses the flooded waterways of the Metro, thanks to Fedor the Fisherman, and arrives at the Venice station. At Venice, Artyom sneaks through the Red Line guards and confronts Pavel. Pavel reveals the Dark One's location at Oktябрьskaya, being loaded onto a train, but the two are interrupted by Fedor attempting to take on the Red Line himself. Pavel escapes, but with Fedor's help, Artyom is sent in the direction of Sparta, the overrun base of the Order. Artyom navigates through the flooded marshes, kills a massive mutated shrimp, and regroups with the Order, including Anna. However, not long after arriving, the traitorous Letsnitsky and the Red Line breach into Sparta, killing many members of the Order before taking Anna hostage. The Red Line escapes into the catacombs beneath the old church, as Artyom follows close behind. Deep in the catacombs, Artyom navigates ruins, the visions of the dead, numerous Nasalis, before confronting the matriarchal Big Mama. Defeating it plunges Artyom into the waters beneath the catacombs, spitting him out not far from where the Red Line held Anna. Climbing through the vents, Artyom learns of the Red Line's plan to unleash a virus upon the stations, decimating its population before taking control of the entire metro. Artyom travels through a massacred and burnt-out station used as a testing ground for the Red Line, before ultimately reaching Corbett and Anna. After securing their release and passing out from a lack of clean oxygen, Anna and Artyom awake in a quarantine station, showing the effects of the Red Line's bioweapon. Khan appears and guides Artyom through the infected station, showing the horrible conditions its inhabitants live under, those going without, and those being shot at for simply wanting to leave. Khan guides Artyom through a forgotten metro tunnel, one left untouched for years, in order to take him towards a place known as the River of Fate, a reworked concept pulled from 2034. Here, Artyom is plunged through his own memories once more. The bombing of the Hive, the tracking down of the Little Dark One, and ultimately, a glimpse into the future at the location of the Dark One. With the assistance of Khan, Artyom tracks down the train, fights his way on board, and rescues the young Dark One, who once again plunges Artyom through his own memories. It is revealed that Artyom became the first conduit for the Dark Ones and humanity, that he isn't alone, but
You're not
the
alone.
first.
You're the first.
We remembered you and were waiting. We could remember all the thoughts of our race. And you killed everyone. And now I'm alone.
The two escape, and Artyom vows to protect the Dark One with his dying breath. Above ground, the Dark One sticks close to Artyom, and even notes that he is changing, that his former violent nature is subsiding, and a more merciful version of himself is rising to the surface. Along the way, the Little Dark One shares his power and his insight with Artyom, easing his journey, and allowing him to view this broken world in an entirely different way. However, the Dark One doesn't help Artyom entirely out of his own kindness. Artyom has something the Dark One doesn't quite understand, or knows just yet. The duo eventually find Lesnitsky, and together, traverse through the traitor's memories. The creation of the Red Line's virus, the testing of it on unsuspecting civilians, the unfolding plan of the communist faction. Artyom chooses to spare Lesnitsky's life, much to the approval of the impressionable Dark One.
Killing is worse.
From there, Artyom navigates the dead city and encounters flashes of the past, avoids swarms of watchmen and terrifying demons, before coming face to face with Pavel for one final time. After a difficult fight, Artyom chooses to spare Pavel despite everything that happened. In that decision, the young Dark One learns what it means to forgive and to grant mercy.
Thank you. I will remember this.
After the encounter with Pavel, the Dark One and Artyom regroup with Miller and Khan. There, they discover through a psychic connection that a nest of hibernating Dark Ones exists in the deepest parts of D6. The young Dark One commits to the idea of awakening them, lest he be alone forever. Khan and Artyom try to convince Miller to open the line that would lead the Dark One to his hibernating people. But keeping in line with the orders if it's hostile you kill it mentality does not give his full assurances to the group. In order to convince him, Artyom, Miller, Khan, and the Dark One head down into the tunnels to meet with the leaders of the factions, hoping to reveal to the entire Metro the Red Line's plans. Realizing the meeting was a diversion to draw troops away from D6, Miller, Artyom, and even Khan make their way towards D6 and its defense. Before the final battle begins, the Dark One bids his farewell to Artyom and promises to return with help. After a lengthy battle between the two factions, the Red Line succeeds in breaching through the Order's defenses. Left with no other option, Miller orders Artyom to detonate the bombs held at key locations around D6, destroying it and bearing the Order along with the Red Line. Here, the story diverges. If the player chose to ignore Khan's message of mercy and forgiveness throughout the game, and instead proceeded with violence and apathy, the Order does not win against the Red Line. In one final act of desperation, Artyom activates the bombs, and all of D6 collapses. The Red Line, the Order, both of them are destroyed, though the Metro itself was saved. In contrast, if the player grants mercy and forgiveness throughout the campaign, the Dark Ones would arrive and help the Order. As Artyom is about to destroy everything he helped to build, the Dark One returns. He, along with his awakened brethren, defeated the Line, and the Spartan Order regained control of D6. And in the brief epilogue, Artyom narrates the events that unfolded after the battle. And as the Dark Ones wander off to places unknown, the Little One, the last light of the Metro, promises to one day return.
The Dark Ones are gone. But I know we will meet again. Maybe they really were sent to save us. Maybe we did earn forgiveness.
As is obvious, Last Light is an entirely different story from 2034. Despite this, Last Light does adapt certain plot elements found in the novel. For example, Sasha and Hunter's journey is morphed into Artyom's to a certain extent. Last Light combines the two together, having Artyom start out as a Hunter type, a man haunted by his past and the violence he's wrought, before transitioning into Sasha's hopeful nature towards the game's end. The game also strikes more of a balance to the man versus nature and the man versus man elements, the political commentary, and the virus subplot. The destruction of D6 and the destruction of the infected stations mirror one another, with Artyom's bad end resulting in a death similar to Sasha's. The Station of Fate is also adapted and retooled to become the River of Fate, again adding to the mysticism of the Metro, being this living entity in its own right. The horrors of the Metro are amplified in Last Light. The sequel brings to the surface horrors relating to radiation and mutants, dark tunnels and spider-like creatures, viruses and other biological terrors, the atrocity of man, and the elements of cosmic horror round out Last Light's experience. Last Light sees the return of all the mainstay mutants present in the original game, save for the librarians. Along with these returns, new mutants, such as the arachnophobia-inducing spider bugs that lurk in the darkest tunnels, and the massive mutated shrimps that occupy Moscow's marshes and underground rivers, make appearances. The Nacellas make their return along with the matriarchal Big Mama as the first boss fight in the game. Mutated bears also make a debut in Last Light, appearing as massive beasts not too dissimilar in design from the Yaoguai featured in the Fallout franchise. And of course, the massive demons make their dramatic return, turning each fraying moment above ground into a fight for survival. The atrocities committed by both the Fourth Reich faction and the Red Line faction are prominent narrative junctions. The creation of a viral bioweapon, the infecting of innocent civilians, the burning and destruction of entire stations as testing grounds, and the betrayal of Pavel early in the game all contribute to this horrifying reality. The mysticism of the Metro is heavily expanded upon in this highly anticipated sequel. 2033 introduced several key concepts that return. Flashes of the past through Artyom's eyes. Souls of the dead, unable to pass over that repeat their memories over and over. The Dark Ones and their influence. And the Dark Star anomalies that manifest underground. The Great Door, featured in the Lost Catacombs level of 2033, is referenced by the Little Dark One, mentioning that a Great Door is calling for Artyom.
Sometimes I see a door. Somebody calls for you from there. Why?
Hinting towards his possible death unless he changes his ways. Along with these concepts, new supernatural phenomena occur as well. Ill-defined ghost-induced darkness, causing any source of light, save for the lighter itself, to be rendered useless until the area is left. This is possibly adapted from a similarly ill-defined darkness Khan warns Artyom about in the 2033 novel. In the final confrontation with Pavel, entities known as Damned Souls by fans attempt to drag both Pavel and Artyom into purgatory with them. Finally, the River of Fate acts as an anomalous lifeline of the Metro. Being an adaptation of the Station of Fate seen in 2034, the River of Fate acts in much the same way, providing insight into the future and allowing the altering of destinies. Last Light marks a significant departure in thematic tone from its predecessors. 2033 built in the sense of danger and hopelessness, and with the destruction of the Dark Ones, a sense of nihilistic futility, that the world cannot be changed for the better, that whatever future the citizens of the Metro might have had is gone forever. 2034 follows in these footsteps, painting an even bleaker world in the aftermath of the Dark One's annihilation. Senseless violence, indiscriminate killing, a Metro barely hanging on, and the last glimmers of hope dying with those who still believed. Last Light, however, seeks to break this seemingly endless cycle of violence, to bring forth a future worth saving. Mercy, forgiveness, redemption, and hope are the core thematic principles that uplift Last Light and set it apart from its predecessors. 2033 is all about repeating the same mistakes and continuing the cycle of violence, of failing to evolve and to change, to fail to heed the warnings of Khan and the Dark Ones. Last Light is meant to invoke that change. Throughout the story, Khan repeatedly emphasizes the importance of mercy and forgiveness, and through protecting the Little Dark One. Last Light entrusts Artyom and the player who controls him in teaching these principles to the impressionable youth. The game itself will test you. Will you learn the lesson, evolve, and find redemption? Or will you revert to the violence that destroyed the world and lead yourself down a path of damnation? Mercy and forgiveness are strewn throughout the entire campaign of Last Light. Moral points become a major factor in deciding the character's ultimate fate and in achieving the canon ending for Last Light. In freeing prisoners from the Fourth Reich, and sparing the lives of soldiers, and making the morally righteous decisions throughout, Artyom expresses the theme of mercy prevailing over violence. He successfully breaks the violence he perpetuated in the previous game, and steps away from the "if it's hostile you kill it" dogma he'd been indoctrinated into. This extends to the more reprehensible characters as well. Choosing to spare Lesnitsky and Pavel shows evolution, and shows the Little Dark One that humanity truly is worth saving, that the path of mercy and forgiveness is the one to walk. This ultimately leads to Artyom's redemption. Artyom's arc of redemption starts at the very beginning. He heeds Khan's pleas to rescue the Dark One, to spare it and nurture it, rather than to kill it. The silent protagonist wrestles with the weight of what he did to the now orphan child, how he wiped out an entire species, and sets out to do whatever he can to right this wrong. This journey is not all too dissimilar from the journey of Ender and Ender's Game, wiping out a seemingly hostile species at the order of an authority figure, only to wrestle with the consequences of his actions. This leads Artyom to intentionally changing his ways, rejecting the old ideologies of the Metro, and reuniting the Little Dark One with his sleeping brethren. And while this may not resurrect the entire species, nor erase what he's done, by leading by example, the Dark Ones are able to forgive, bringing back that last light of hope to the world. Artyom's rejection of the old ways is strewn throughout the game as well, and the loading screen narrations and the notes scattered around, Artyom expresses his growing disdain for the state of the Metro. The violence, the animosity, the chain of destruction that never seems to end. He wants to escape it all, escape this self-eating snake, and to leave it all behind. This becomes a catalyst for his journey in saving the Metro from the Red Line, in saving the Little Dark One and redeeming himself for the violence he's caused, and in his overall desire to leave the tunnels and escape the cycle of violence in Metro 2035. Metro 2035 paints a distinctly different world that we've come to know in past iterations. Given that the novels and games occur in a separate continuity, the events of Last Light never occurred, meaning it has been 2 years since destruction of the Dark Ones. The Fourth Reich is growing in power, the Red Line is slowly suffering from a famine, and the Order is growing ever closer to the Hansa economic powerhouse. In the aftermath of 2033, Artyom has since left the Order, married Anna, and lives in his home station of Exhibition. However, all is not peaceful, as Artyom is convinced that he heard a radio transmission from outside of Moscow while standing atop Ostankino Tower that fateful day. Since then, he's become obsessed with seeking life out beyond the limits of this dead city. Due to his growing obsession, his relationship with Anna is deteriorating, and his fellow Metrolites have begun ostracizing him. However, Homer, the narrator from 2034, informs Artyom of survivors living outside of Moscow. This then spurs Artyom on another journey, this time to Svetnoy Boulevard Station, in order to speak with the radio technician Umbach, who spoke with survivors in the north. Along the way, Artyom is captured by the Fourth Reich, forced to plant explosives in the theater station, and learns of Umbach's capture by the Red Line. However, a Red officer kills Umbach before Artyom has a chance to speak to him, and after the explosives detonate, escapes and heads back to Pulis, though at the cost of radiation poisoning after traversing above ground. At Pulis, Miller accuses Artyom of being driven mad by the Dark Ones, and orders Artyom to leave Anna. Artyom agrees to these terms, so long as he's allowed to deliver Miller's missive to the Fourth Reich, urging them to stop the conflict between the Red Line and the Fourth Reich. Upon arriving at Tverskaya, the Fourth Reich main station, the missive is taken, and Artyom is tossed into servitude, forced into the tunnels in an effort to stall the approaching Red Line faction, as the Fourth Reich had begun losing the conflict. However, it isn't until the fighting in the dim tunnel subsides that Artyom realizes they'd all been fighting each other. Prisoners fighting prisoners. One of them claims she knew someone who met survivors outside of Moscow, and that the Reds are building a base above ground. With information in hand, Artyom heads back to Tsvednoy Boulevard. In an act that diverges from his characterization in the games, Artyom falls in love with Sasha, who survived the flooding of Tolskaya the year prior, and ultimately heads to the Balashika Red base above ground with a stalker named Savalij. At the Red base, Artyom and Savalij take out Red soldiers and, upon smashing their radios out of frustration due to hearing nothing but static, realizes their radio towers were actually jammers. Suddenly, radio chatter from all over the world flooded in on the radio. Together, the pair, along with the 3 men who had just arrived from east of Moscow, destroy the rest of the jamming towers. This only serves to anger the Order, and Artyom is commanded to stop the destruction of the facility, lest they reinstate World War III. Down in Polis, Miller reveals that World War III never stopped, but it is instead ongoing. The jammers were meant to make Moscow appear dead, playing possum as it were, in order to keep the Metro and the survivors alive. Vindicated, Artyom is reinstated in the Order, and is given the task of delivering ammunition to the Hansa. However, at the delivery site, Artyom realizes the men are Reds, not Hansa, and his fellow Order members drag him away to kill him, now that he knows the truth. Ultimately, the Reds try to use the new ammunition on the crowd of starving Red Light citizens, but their numbers overwhelm the soldiers, and when the soldiers are dead, move their attention to the Hansa soldiers as well. In the chaos, Artyom escapes from Miller's men, though Savalij is killed. Artyom returns to Svetnoy Boulevard with Alive and will Homer to rejoin with Sasha. Unfortunately, his radiation poisoning is worsening, and the group takes him to a man named Veselov. Artyom awakens inside a Soviet-era bunker. Here, the last remnants of the Russian government, referred to as the Invisible Watchers by the unsuspecting Metrolites since the first novel, and whispered about as nothing more than a legend, has been pulling the strings all along. The Hansa, the Reds, the Reich, the Order, faction conflicts orchestrated by this clandestine government as a form of population control. There is no ongoing World War III, only the remnant of the government clinging to what little power they have. Artyom rejects the Watchers, and after Sasha proclaims her love for Veselov, returns to Polis, where he is jailed. There, he grabs a plan with Homer, the Spartan Loika, and Artyom's best friend, Letyaga, to escape the Order and distribute leaflets to tell the public of the Watchers and the world outside. At their trial for desertion, Letyaga reveals the truth behind Miller and the Reds, sparking outrage among the Order members. A civil war breaks out, Letyaga is killed, and Artyom surrenders after Anna's life is threatened by one of Miller's loyalists. He's brought to Orbit Station, hoping that Loika can capture Veselov before it's too late. Meanwhile, the chairman of Polis speaks to the entire station, informing them of Moscow's status as but one of many surviving cities, that they are not alone. However, the chairman reinforces the lie, claiming that World War III is still ongoing, and that Polis will reunite the metro stations in order to defeat the West. In an act of betrayal, Artyom learns that Loika now works with Veselov and the Invisible Watchers, and that Homer refused to make the leaflets in order to write a book about Artyom's fight against the Dark Ones for Polis. Ultimately, Artyom flees with Anna back to Exhibition. The pair try in futility to convince the inhabitants of Exhibition of the truth of the world outside, but they call him a madman once more. With Hansa approaching, and with little hope remaining, Artyom and Anna flee above ground. Loading up Savalij's car, Anna and Artyom leave the Metro and Moscow for good, heading to the distant Vladivostok. And so ends Artyom's journey. The creation of 2035 is an interesting one. Written alongside Last Light, Glukhovsky originally stated that 2035 would be a novel adaptation of the game's story, but upon release, only took certain elements from the game while crafting more of a sequel to the book canon in the video game itself. However, since the two mediums are separate continuities, many characters, situations, and events are different. For instance, while the battle for an unnamed bunker up to Miller in a wheelchair still occurred, no references to D6 are actually made. Ullman still dies, the Red Line and General Corbett are defeated, but the subplot of saving the young Dark One is completely absent. These details are not the only elements missing, however. The horror of 2035 takes a drastic departure from the preceding books. From a tone and ambience perspective, 2035 strays away from the unique brand of subterranean horror and ventures more into the post-apocalyptic thriller category. For example, the overall dangers of the Metro take a backseat to the unfolding conspiracy of the Invisible Watchers and the world outside. Early on in the book, Artyom states that the world above is beginning to thaw out, and that melting snow gave way to a rise in radiation, and whatever mutants remained above fled Moscow. Hardly any moments featuring any kind of mutant, both above and below ground, are featured. Outside of stray remarks about the dangers of the tunnels, mutants simply don't make that much of a return. What does make a return, however, is radiation. Right off the bat, radiation is consistently referenced as a new emerging threat to the Metrolites. Rising radiation, radiation poisoning, fear of contaminating the Metro without proper cleaning procedures, the absolute necessity of a suit and gas mask to avoid getting sick, and Artyom's own run-ins with rat poisoning shift the focus away from the supernatural mutagenic horrors and into the brutal effects of a post-war environment. Along with radiation, conspiracies and the atrocities of man are once again the primary features in the novel series. The continuing semi-mythological legend of the Invisible Watchers and Artyom struggling to dismantle the control of this shadow government. His own arc becomes attempting to free the Metro from an oppressive regime, this time understanding full well the negative intent behind the Invisible Watchers, as opposed to that of the Dark Ones. Artyom consistently bears witness to the actions of the Red Line and the Fourth Right faction, bombing entire stations, capturing innocents and enslaving them, forcing prisoners to fight their battles, intense famines decimating food sources, and even the actions of the Red Line and the Hansa and their attempt at wiping out an entire crowd of people. Additionally, the mysticism and the mystery of the Metro is pulled back completely. Outside of a few stray remarks about the Metro living and breathing, about it consuming yet another soul, the mystery and the horror of the Metro is mostly absent. Instead, the world outside becomes the new mystery, becomes an entirely new mystical realm to be explored. Artyom rises up, emerges from darkness, and ventures out into the wide unknowns. And while the ending is still steeped in that Metro bleakness, somewhere out there is a glimmer of hope. As stated, 2035 marks a distinctive shift in tone, mood, and thematic elements present in previous iterations of the Metro. 2035 moves away from the commentary on violence, morality, and trauma, and focuses on the struggles between freedom and control, on breaking and escaping the cycle of animosity and emerging into a wider world. One of the major thematic topics present is the struggle between freedom and control. From the warring factions to the actions of Miller to the influence of the Invisible Watchers, Artyom's journey in 2035 becomes a war for the soul of the Metro itself. Either he succeeds and cuts the strings to their puppeteers, or he fails and the Metro never evolves. This, in turn, returns to this idea of evolution, of learning and growing, lest the same cycle of violence continues. For Artyom, he has successfully recognized this cycle, has sought to break free, and seeks to take the Metro with him. However, the wider Metro does not heed this call to action, and instead sinks back into the old ways, preparing to defend themselves from Western powers, and continuing the spirit of a war that destroyed their entire world. In breaking free from the cycle, Artyom is finally able to leave the Metro fully and completely. In essence, Artyom and Anna become the carriers of the Dark Ones' message of peace, but like the species that came before them, they too failed in their mission. Having tried his best, Artyom understands the futility of attempting to teach those who refuse to listen and choose to remain in blissful ignorance. Even those who express a desire to change the Metro, such as Homer and Sasha, follow in the footsteps of Hunter. Ultimately, Artyom and Anna ascend from the darkness of the tunnels, from the cycle of violence that plagued their entire lives, and head out into the wider world in search of those who will listen and who will evolve along with them. A journey to be seen in Metro Exodus. Like with 2035, Exodus differs drastically from its video game prequels. 2033 adapted the original novel, while Last Light adapted core thematic and plot elements from 2034. Exodus does both, acting as both a sequel to the video games and to the book series itself. It encapsulates and continues the story originally present in 2035, while also acting as a sequel to the 4A game's narrative as well. Along with this, Exodus takes place almost entirely outside of the Metro, moving the narrative to a roaming train visiting new regions. This latest game takes elements from the Stalker franchise, featuring massive explorable sections, a roaming narrative, and an open-world stylization. Players follow Artyom as he escapes the Metro and seeks to explore the world outside. Exodus begins with Artyom descending back down into the tunnels of the Metro. Dimly lit environments, skeletons littering the damp ground, whispers of the dead, and dangerous mutants re-establish the tone fans of the series are familiar with. However, as players traverse the tunnels, the sound of a train bell can be heard off in the distance. After a brutal run-in with a pack of watchmen, Artyom's group of Order members rescue and patch him up. Upon awakening, players are reintroduced to Anna, who, like her 2035 counterpart, expresses concern about Artyom going above ground. However, unlike the novel version of Miller, the game version expresses more concern than animosity towards Artyom. Whispers of the world outside follow Artyom. Rumors of signals received years ago, of children hoping for Artyom to find a better world outside, and of the public's growing distaste for Artyom's obsession. Just outside the hospital ward, Artyom regroups with his fellow Spartans. Duke, Demir, Alyosha, Stepan, Idiot, and Sam. Characters will come to know over the course of the story. Later, Anna and Artyom sit atop a destroyed building listening for signals, but eventually, the two make their way back to the Metro. However, to both of their surprise, a train suddenly barrels through the tracks of Moscow, leading both to realize life does exist outside Moscow. Then, Artyom and Anna are captured by unknown soldiers. While captured, Artyom and Anna speak with an old woman and a teenager, both from a village 200 kilometers or 124 miles away. Artyom, along with the woman and teenager, are shot and tossed in a hole to die. Of course, something as simple as a gunshot wound doesn't stop the savior of the Metro. Artyom rallies himself, follows the train, sneaks inside the compound, meets a mechanic named Yermak, finds and frees Anna. Inside, the pair inadvertently destroy a jammer, allowing radio signals to flood into Moscow. The unnamed commander claims the world is still at war, and that the jammer was a necessity for protecting the people of the Metro. These invisible watchers cut the world off in an apparent effort to protect them all. Artyom and Anna, along with Yermak, make their way through the facility, steal an armored train, and flee from Moscow. However, a flashbang goes off inside the engine, and upon awakening, finds out Miller knew about the jammers in the war all along. After the Watchers insist on killing Artyom and Anna, the Order takes control and tosses out the Watchers, committing to escaping Moscow with them. The first section, known as the Volga, and consists of flooded marshes and small lakes, is the first stop on the Aurora crew's journey. Out in the Volga, Artyom is often accompanied by Duke. There, the pair's goal is to lower a drawbridge that is currently inaccessible due to an anti-technology cult holed up in a crumbling church. This cult, which worships a massive giant mutated catfish known as a czarfish, butts heads with the crew all along the way. At one point, Anna falls into an irradiated bunker while attempting to explore, though was saved by Artyom. This event, however, will have far-reaching implications. Two former prisoners of the cult, Katya and her daughter Nastya, join the crew, along with a mechanic known as Crest, who helps Yermak operate the train. Ultimately, Artyom succeeds in lowering the drawbridge, and the crew venture on to their next stop, Yamantau Mountain. Throughout the entire first section of the game, Miller notes that he wants to make it to Yamantau, to what he believes is the Ark, a bunker where the final remnants of the Russian government reside, and where he can get information that the war is still in fact going on. However, Upon arriving at Yamantau, there is clear no remnants remain. Cannibals now occupy the massive bunker, and the order comes dangerously close to being their next victims. After escaping the killing floor, the group makes their way to the command center and gathers information on any remaining governmental bunkers. A long shootout ensues, and the Spartans flee the cannibalistic compound. En route to their next destination, the group debates on their next decision: head to the Volga and settle there, or find a safe place to set up their own colony. The colony becomes a de facto choice. 3 months later, the Aurora arrives at the Caspian Sea in search of the Caspian I Communications Center. There, they hope to find maps created after the bombs fell that reveal spots free from radiation. Unfortunately, when they arrive, the Caspian Sea has been completely dried out. Low on fuel, dealing with unbearable heat, endless sand dunes, and a hostile Mad Max-style dictatorship known as the Munai Bailair rules the land. Hostile humanimals dwell underneath the sands, various mutants prowl the dunes, and the hostile Baron's servants watch over an enslaved people. While searching for the comm center, Artyom helps a woman named Gyul. Gyul is locked in a struggle against the Munai Bailair, specifically the ruthless Baron, who has enslaved her people. In repayment for helping her fend off the attacking Munai Bailair, she assists Artyom in finding the communications center and the archives inside. He makes his way in, fends off horrid spiderbugs, and successfully locates the maps in question. Now without fuel, Artyom, Tamir, and Gyul infiltrate the Baron's main fortress in order to steal a train car with enough fuel for the Aurora. After a battle with the Baron and his forces, Gyul blows up the fortress and instigates a revolution against the Munai Bailair, freeing many enslaved people in the process. Ultimately, Tamir chooses to return with Artyom, feeling confident the people of the Caspian Sea will be able to overthrow their oppressors. In the interim, Stepan and Katya get married, and Anna's condition slowly worsens. Katya suggests that the approaching taiga, with its fresh air, could help heal Anna's condition. As a failsafe, Katya remembers a radiation drug produced in Novosibirsk that could cure Anna's condition. Similar decides that they will settle in the valley if habitable, and if Anna's condition worsens, they'll head to the Dead City in order to find the drug. In the taiga, the railcar Alyosha and Artyom drive is hit by falling rocks, sending both straight into the river. Artyom awakens on the opposite side of the dam, saved by an unknown woman. Artyom reawakens and heads into the forest, hoping to find Alyosha and regroup with the Aurora. Stripped of his equipment, he uses a crossbow to fend off the packs of wild wolves and avoids the hulking Master of the Forest. Along the way, Artyom observes two feuding factions, the more violent pirates and the more passive pioneers, both collectively known as the Children of the Forest. Artyom sneaks to their encampments, makes his way up the hills, and comes face to face with the Master of the Forest. He successfully fends it off and formally meets the woman who saved him, Olga. Artyom steals a boat and heads up the valley, eventually reuniting with Alyosha. He informs Artyom that the dam preventing the entire valley from being flooded is slowly decaying, and that the Children of the Forest must be warned of the approaching catastrophe. After one final fight with the Master of the Forest, killing it in the process, Alyosha and Artyom zipline back to the Aurora, and the Spartans venture off. However, Anna's condition only worsens, and the group makes the difficult decision to venture into the highly irradiated Novosibirsk. Arriving at the aptly named Dead City, Miller and Artyom set out to find the medicine to save Anna. The two venture down into the metro, fending off Nasalis as they scour the abandoned tunnels. It's clear a war was waged inside the metro at some point in the past, leaving nearly all of its inhabitants dead. All except one. A solitary child named Kirill still roams the tunnels, the last survivor of Novosibirsk. His father left on a mission, but sadly, never returned. Here, Miller and Artyom diverge. Miller heads for the impact map that Kirill's father attempted to find, and Artyom goes to the Institute in search of Anna's cure. As Miller ventures down into the bunker in search of the map, he learns of the fate of the Novosibirsk Metro. In these highly irradiated conditions, anti-radiation drugs are a necessity for continued survival. However, over time, the Metro ran low, and rather than attempting to solve this problem, those in charge began hoarding the drugs and planned an escape from the Metro. A war breaks out between the Oscom governmental faction and the people of the Metro, and Oscom floods the tunnels with gas, killing civilians and combatants alike. Miller avoids horrifying mutants known as Blind Ones and eventually finds Carilla's father and the impact map. At the same time, Artyom traverses through the irradiated Metro tunnels. There, he encounters multiple mutants and a strange biomass that is slowly consuming the tunnels. He fends off massive leech-like mutants, suffers from debilitating radiation, and makes his way above ground. He sees flashes of the memories of those who died, encounters a strange gravitational dark star anomaly, and sees Dark Ones around him, but eventually pulls himself into the Institute. Following him outside, a bright dark star-like anomaly shines into the building. Groans and whispers and flashes of the past haunt him wherever he goes. Inside the Institute proper, Artyom encounters the same horrifying Blind Ones, mutated, great ape-like creatures that now roam the facility. He stealthily avoids these telepathic creatures, hearing their thoughts inside his head as he pushes towards the cure. Even as the radiation worsens and his hallucinations become all the more powerful, he never sways from his objective. Artyom finds the cure, escapes from the Blind Ones, and returns to the city streets. There, in the intense radiation, Miller finds him, and together, Kirill, Artyom, and Miller drive out of the dead city. Miller ultimately uses his own anti-rad injection to keep Artyom alive, sacrificing himself in the process, giving Artyom the chance to find the Aurora, to deliver on the life-saving medication, and to give him a shot at survival. On board the train, Artyom is given multiple infusions in hopes of flushing the radiation out of his system. In a state of fluctuating consciousness, he has visions of the Metro and of Miller, of venturing outside, of leaving the darkness of the Metro, of finding someplace better than the endless tunnels. And depending on the player's actions, Artyom is met with one of two fates. If the player fails to accumulate enough moral points, Artyom falls unconscious, never to awaken again. In this state, he comes to inside a dilapidated version of the Aurora. Artyom is then visited by those who died before him, Eugene from Exhibition, Urban, and eventually Khan. Projecting his soul from the depths of the Metro, Khan informs him he's become one of the many lost souls, forced to remain aboard the Dark Aurora for all eternity. He chastises him for refusing to heed his lesson, to learn mercy and forgiveness, only to be ignored by the arriving Miller. A soldier's duty is to shoot the enemy, not ask questions. In this ending, Artyom is buried at Lake Baikal along with Miller, and what few members of the Order remain grieve for their loss. However, if the player accumulates enough moral points and keeps his crew together, they achieve a good ending. Here, Artyom stands before a tree at Lake Baikal with the ghost of Miller. His now dead father-in-law vindicates Artyom, telling him he was right for heading out into the world, and that he was an old fool for fearing it. He urges him to cling to life, to take care of Anna, and to become the new leader of the Order. Artyom awakens and makes a full recovery. In the ending cinematic, the Order celebrates the life of Miller, and Artyom expresses his hope for the future and his new duty to the world.
I would say we all go home. But this home seems too large for just us. You know, the Colonel once told me, he created the Order to save people. All of them. I say it's time we perform this duty.
Incorporating elements of 2035 as the intro to the game, Exodus expands upon the original story, and sets the characters off on a long-lasting journey to find a new home. The majority of 2035, which deals with Artyom uncovering the secret of the Invisible Watchers and the plot to keep Moscow in the dark as a form of population control, is primarily adapted in the first leg of the game. However, several elements are left out, left vague and unanswered, and are skipped over entirely. Sasha and Homer are completely absent. The subplots with a red line in the Fourth Reich are scrubbed, and Miller's status as a secondary antagonist to that of the Invisible Watchers is completely erased. However, other elements of 2035 are adapted into Exodus. Artyom's primary motivation for leaving the Metro is the same, believing life exists beyond the Metro. His status as an outcast is dialed back considerably, with members of the Order still holding him in high regard. While the Invisible Watchers are mentioned, and alluded to being the joint effort of the Order and the Hansa, they are not the remnants of the Russian government. This entire subplot is abandoned in favor of the groups believing World War III to still be in effect, rather than the malicious intent of using internal conflicts to cull the population and maintain control. Miller also notes that he too fell for the lie put forth by the groups, once the Yamantau is revealed to have fallen as well. Artyom's radiation poisoning subplot is also reworked and given to Anna instead, giving the protagonist an additional motivator for finding a better place to live. The men who arrived from outside of Moscow are also reworked into the teenager and the grandmother, adding to the Hansa's brutal response to outsiders and their threats to the status quo. The distant Vladivostok is also reincorporated into the story through Sam's story, a DLC mission that sees the American attempting to find his way home. The game also pulls in characters from the Metro novel series, some with reworked purposes and names, while others remain similar to their novel counterparts. The character of Duke appears to be a reworked version of Latyaga from the novel, with dialogue indicating his backstory is fairly similar to that of the book character. Stepan is also pulled from 2035, though instead of inciting a rebellion within the Order, he accompanies Artyom on his journey with the other Order members. Sam is added in as a relatively minor character from 2035, only really seen pushing Miller's wheelchair around. Other than these plot threads or character integrations, much of Exodus is an entirely original story. The horror of Exodus is distinctly different, yet contains many similar elements at the same time. For a vast majority of the game, the darkened tunnels of the Metro are tossed to the wayside in favor of vast, unique environments that pose their own threats to the crew of the Aurora. Unlike 2035, Exodus still uses mutants as a major threat, on top of the threat of man and the threat of debilitating radiation. The very first section of the game deals with Artyom dealing with radiation. The darkened tunnels of the Metro, echoes of the dead, and fighting off a massive pack of watchmen, and the conspiratorial actions of man through the controlling Hansa. The next section, the Volga, brings with it new horrors to be dealt with. The Volga features strange humanimals, feral, mutated, and hostile creatures not too dissimilar from ghouls seen in the Fallout franchise. Radiation becomes an increasing part of the plot, contributing to Anna's eventual radiation poisoning later in the game. Dark star anomalies also appear sporadically, especially in the train yard portion of the level. Along with many of the returning mutants, the shrimps, the watchmen, and the demons inhabiting abandoned industrial areas. The game also introduces a radical anti-technology cult that worships a giant fish. This fish attacks Artyom regularly, embedding elements of thalassophobia in the level. The cult itself appears to be an adaptation of the Great Worm cult that existed in the original 2033 novel, though without the cannibalism. Same technophobia and xenophobia, blaming them for causing the Great War, though the game swaps out the worm for the giant fish. The Yamantau bunker, however, contains its own cannibalistic cult. The main horror of Yamantau is the action of man, specifically in the form of the massive cannibalistic cult. Bloodied hallways, bloodthirsty humans, body parts strewn about, all tied together to create a truly gruesome environment. The humans seen here seem to be affected by radiation, or at the very least, the humans they've been ingesting, appearing mutated and unsightly. The Yamantau bunker also seems to be an adaptation of the Ark, mentioned in 2034. They also bear resemblance to the cannibal mutants in the Hills Have Eyes, or the Wrong Turn series. From here, the group head to the Caspian Sea. The now barren Caspian Sea appears inspired by the Mad Max film series, using some elements present in the post-apocalyptic film series. The desert contains many humanimals hiding underneath the sands, waiting for unsuspecting victims to walk past. Demons can be seen flying around the region, and even flaming tumbleweeds present a minor threat if the player gets too close. In the command center below, arachnophobia-inducing spider bugs make their return in massive swarms, making the entire section a nightmare. The Munai Bailair stand in for the reprehensible faction, using slave labor to continue their empire. The Taiga level shifts the style of storytelling back to a more linear structure than the previous open worlds. The area brings to the surface a spiritual forest landscape containing divine beings, or at the very least, divine from the perspective of the tribes that live there. Due to the section being mostly stealth-based, as Artyom moves around the region, many of the horrors come from the natural world. Roaming packs of wolves, the semi-hostile children of the forest, the spider bugs and shrimps, and of course, the massive master of the forest. And finally, the Dead City returns the game to form, with classic Metro-style ambiance. The Dead City contains highly dangerous enemies and obstacles for Artyom to overcome. For starters, the intense radiation causes filters to be swapped out regularly. Nasales make an appearance in the Novosibirsk tunnels with a design overhaul. The flooded waterways also serve as the home for massive mutated worms, ranging in size from smaller leeches to giant earthworms that also seem to be the origin of the disgusting biomass. And of course, the telepathic blind ones stand in for the threat of the librarians, forcing the player to be silent as they traverse through the laboratories. They speak to Artyom as he progresses through the level, coming in waves of distant voices in his head. Artyom also contends with the effects of radiation. Vivid hallucinations of Anna begin to interfere with his mind the longer he remains exposed. Other supernatural phenomena occur as well, including flashes of the past as momentary glitches in his vision, and as full-blown remembrances, and the ghost-induced darkness that disables his flashlight. New anomalies appear in the Dead City. A kind of enhanced or changed dark star anomaly seems to follow Artyom through this level. This supernatural phenomena is capable of making objects float, and short-circuiting electronics with its electromagnetic field. It is electrical in nature, but does not outright harm Artyom, almost acting as a passive observer. Exodus has the lightest tone and themes compared to that of 2033 and Last Light. 2033 dealt with perpetuating violence. Last Light dealt with mercy and redemption, while Exodus deals with hope and rebirth in this new world outside of the Metro. Hope in the face of adversity remains a consistent theme throughout the entire story. From the start, Artyom clings to the hope that life exists beyond the Metro, and even when he finds that life outside and is vindicated, he maintains the hope that he will find a place to settle down outside the Metro, a place to call home. This hope persuades the other characters as well, moving the Order members to go with him, moving them to improve the conditions in each area they go to, and in moving Miller to accept a brighter future is possible. Morality plays an integral part in the story. Many of Artyom's decisions sprout from the teachings of both Khan and the Dark Ones. Will Artyom, and the player by extension, continue to follow the teachings they learned in Last Light, or will they revert to their own violent ways by the game's end? Should the player not remember and revert back, they will ultimately die, with Khan expressing disappointment in their choices. If they do remember, they survive and arrive at paradise. Rebirth is a core thematic topic in the game. Each area visited by Artyom has the potential to undergo a rebirthing process, whether that be changing the cult of Silentus, or doing away with the structure of the old world at Yamantau, or dismantling the oppressive system of the Munai Bailair, or changing the children of the forest. Rebirth becomes a key part of the Aurora's journey. This is fitting, considering that Aurora means dawn in Latin, with the Order bringing with them a new day wherever they go. By the game's good ending, Artyom undergoes a full rebirth himself. Standing at death's door, Miller bestows upon him the rank of Commander of the Order, leading Artyom down a new path. He's transitioned from a young man following the orders of a violent system to the man in charge, capable of instituting widespread change. Artyom even mentions at the end of the story, as his first act as commander, that,
You know, the Colonel once told me he created the Order to save people. All of them. I say it's time we perform this duty.
hinting at their role as the saviors of this new world, bringing with them a new dawn and an era of rebirth. Exodus also appears to have several religious allusions strewn throughout the story. Last Life itself already framed the Dark Ones as messiah figures, while in Exodus, Artyom performs the role of a prophet, similar to the role of Moses in the story of Exodus from the Bible. In this case, Miller would act as an Aaron figure, with the Order being the Aaronic priesthood, Anna as a kind of Miriam figure, and by extension, Khan as the Angel of the Lord figure, the one who influenced Moses. The characters are exiled from their Egypt in Moscow, cross the bridge at the Volga as the parting of the Red Sea, the journey to Yamantau to learn the truth, similar to the journey to Mount Sinai, journey through the Caspian Sea as they wandered through the wilderness of Sinai, the oasis of Kadesh Barnea being the taiga, Mount Hor and the death of Aaron in the Dead City and the death of Miller, and the Banks of Jordan as Lake Baikal. To further add to this interpretation, each of the characters' names holds significant meaning as it relates to either religion, peace, or protecting man. Demir means one who gives peace, Duke meaning priest, Krast for cross, Sam meaning God has heard, Katya meaning pure or perfect, Stepan, one who is crowned, Alyosha, defender or defender of man, Sergei, better known by his nickname Idiot, means servant or protector, and Nikolai means people of victory. With all of these pieces in mind, wherever Artyom's journey takes him next will likely lead him to his metaphorical conquest of Canaan and his duty of saving people, returning him to the Metro one final time in order to change the entire system forever. The Metro video game series and the book series follow different continuities, contain new and returning characters, and focus on different prominent themes. Each serves their own purpose, tells their own story, and analyzes society and man in unique ways that the other may be incapable of doing in its given format. As working trilogies, however, the Metro mediums create different thematic stories, and their purposes differ as time goes on. Let's start with the book series. 2033 focuses predominantly on the themes of violence, xenophobia, and genocide. The book details on the mysteries of the Metro, on the cutthroat nature living underground, of the horrifying mutants and supernatural elements, and of the atrocities men will commit against people or entities they do not understand. This story is bleak, with little hope to be found anywhere. Cults, radical political factions, groups of bandits, all tied together to create a nihilistic environment. Even the ending of wiping out the Dark Ones, the primary threat to the Metro, only served to doom the survivors as they wiped out whatever chance at salvation remained. Its follow-up, 2034, only continues this trend. 2034 follows a mentally broken hunter as he continues his spree of violence in the Metro, killing innocents and criminals alike to solve the mystery of the silent stations. The book mostly focuses on violence, morality, and trauma, ending on a bleak note as the entire Tolskaya station is flooded, presumably killing Sasha and all those inside. The characters show little to no growth, routinely make troubling decisions, and end the journey exactly where they began. No effort to listen or to find redemption is made, and ultimately, the violence of the Metro is perpetuated once more. A bleak ending to a bleak story. 2035 shifts this tone slightly, but still maintains that nihilistic tone. 2035 discusses breaking free from the oppressive cycle of violence in the Metro. It focuses primarily on freedom versus control and leaving oppressive systems. Much of the previous horror elements, such as the supernatural and the mutants, are lacking from the story. Instead, it uses radiation as the primary opponent to man. Artyom struggles to find life outside of the Metro and faces ridicule because of it. However, as is uncovered, the world at large is being radio-jammed by the Invisible Watchers, remnants of the government exerting whatever little control they have left on the Metro. Artyom attempts to inform the public to break free from this oppressive ideology, but the people reject him and cast him out. Miller and parts of the Order turn on him. The Hansa are hunting him down, so he and Anna have no choice but to leave. They leave the oppressive system, chase whatever bit of freedom they can, but know they can never return to the Metro. The video game series starts off in much the same way. 2033 roughly covers the same message. It deals with persistent violence, the depravity of man, the dangers of the post-nuclear Holocaust Metro, and the survivors' rapid response to the Dark Ones. The game itself incorporates action set pieces, redesigns Khan's purpose, integrates more supernatural elements, but maintains the core themes on violence, xenophobia, and genocide. Though, as with the book, the game holds true to the destruction of the Dark Ones in the canon ending, setting up a bleak world to follow, like in 2034. Last Light, however, shifts thematically and tonally. Rather than focus on the persistent violence of man with no hope in sight, Last Light truly does focus on the last bit of hope of the Metro, the young Dark One. Artyom's journey stands in stark contrast of that of Hunter's, who, if occurring in the same timeline, would be happening concurrently. Last Light uses mercy, redemption, and forgiveness as its primary thematic focus. Artyom ventures through the Metro, continuously showing his disdain for the persistent violence and animosity in the tunnels, and seeks to learn the ways of mercy and forgiveness, and to assist the young Dark One in order to reach some kind of redemption. The game also adapts elements of 2034, using the virus subplot, the Station of Fate, and a mixture of Sasha and Hunter's storyline to create a compelling arc for Artyom. Ultimately, his actions earn that much-needed redemption, not just for himself, but for the Metro as a whole. Exodus similarly stands in contrast to that of 2035, choosing to have hope prevail over man's own ignorant nature. Hope, morality, and rebirth become the central themes of Exodus, creating a vibrant, hopeful world above ground for Artyom and the Aurora crew. Artyom's persistent hope that a better place exists out there motivates the other characters to chase that same dream, and winds up leaving each region better off than before. The journey becomes an exodus in the truest sense, adapting some elements from the biblical narrative. By the end of the story, Artyom has achieved his happy ending, standing on the shores of Lake Baikal, with his wife and as the commander of the Order, ready to fulfill the purpose Miller gave to them, to save the world. Despite the similar source material and concurrent storylines, the novel series consistently takes a much bleaker tone, heavy and more nihilistic themes, and chooses to express the worst in people. The games, on the other hand, choose to do the opposite. While the first game does end on a nihilistic note, the following two games attempt to right the wrongs of Artyom's actions. 4A Games and Glukhovsky chose to have the stories follow the path of redemption and hope, leading their characters to the brightest possible future.
Home at the foot of the hill, overlooking a lake.
The Metro series has a long list of narrative works and real-life events that inspired its creation. The Fall of the Soviet Union, Roadside Picnic in the Doomed City by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, the film Letters to a Dead Man, and the Fallout franchise, served as the grounding works Glukhovsky based his own world upon. Metro truly has carved its own unique narrative, inviting in countless authors to add to their ever-expanding world, containing around 116 novels, novellas, and short stories. In August of 2019, Glukhovsky announced he had begun work on a sequel to Metro Exodus, claiming that the Metro gaming series will be continued. Over a year later, in 2020, VIII Games officially announced it had begun work on the next entry in the franchise. In February of 2023, VIII reported the sequel is in a fully playable state and aimed to release the game at some point in 2024. However, chatter on the game has ceased since then, and no real update has been reported since, primarily due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of which Glukhovsky is in staunch opposition to, so much so that the Russian government issued an arrest in absentia, meaning he would face up to 10 to 15 years in prison should he return. Perhaps we'll see some news in the coming months on the status of the game, but for now, we can only hope for the safety of VIII Studios and all those involved in this amazing universe. When the story does continue, the only logical path forward would be Artyom's return to the Metro to finish the Colonel's mission. Maybe then, the Dark Ones will return. But until then, we can only hope.